Hey folks, firstly, welcome. I'm going to run through a few slides just to give you a quick rundown on some of the things you want to see when you're understanding your CAC. CAC isn't the be all end all, it's actually just an early indicator. It tells you if there is some calcification or not, and it gives you a little bit of a rudimentary metric on what that looks like. So let's get into it. Firstly, let's talk about the key four coronary arteries that we're talking about. There are four main arteries in the coronary system. They are the left main, and the left main is this one here. They are the LAD, left anterior descending, which takes us down here. The LCX, which is the left circumference, the left circumflex, and the right coronary artery, which is this one across here. Sometimes you'll get readings on other, which could be other bits and pieces in the capillary arteries and the like, but the four main ones are the ones we're interested in. Okay, when you get a coronary artery calcium score, it's actually been developed by Arthur Agatston. He developed the score to consider both volume and density and put a bit of a rating on how severe the plaque progression is. It is based on the brightness measured in Hounsfield units. So when we get a score, and the score again is a multiplication of density and volume, if we get a score of 0, that tells us we've got no calcified plaque. That does not mean we don't have any soft plaque. It just means we don't have any calcified plaque. It's still a really good position, but don't be naive enough to think, well, I've got a 0. I don't have to worry about anything. I can keep doing what I'm doing. Understanding that a 0 isn't a negative, it just means it's nothing identified. 1 to 10 is minimal. That's still a pretty good space to be, depending on your age group. If you're in your 30s and you've got a 1 to 10, that's not good. If you're in your 80s and you're 1 to 10, that's really good. 11 to 100 is where things start to get interesting, depending on your age group. It's mild atherosclerosis. Keep an eye on some lifestyle factors might need adjustment to make sure it doesn't get any worse. And there has been some evidence of this being reversed when the scores are below 100. 101 to 400 is where it gets concerning, and I'll be frank, I'm sitting in this bucket here. It's really where we're talking about moderate. There's enough there to be considered something that may not be where we want to be. Depending on your age group will determine whether you're in a severe for your age group or a low for your age group. Someone in their 80s with a score of 150 or 200 is fine. We do expect it to progress over our age. If you're in your 40s or your 50s and a score of 300 or 400, then you're up in the upper percentiles. Context, mine was 322 at the age of 53. And that put me in the 95th percentile for my age group. If you're above 400, then that's treated as high. But the important thing to look at these is it's a combination of both volume and density. Ideally, we want our volume low and our density high. So let's unpack that a little bit more. When we get a report, or what our doctors get a report from the labs, usually it's either some text with a number, or they might have some data, but not fully complete. It varies depending on the lab you use. These were all the same lab, and I had two different levels of detail in the doctor's report. Now, even that in itself is pretty light on. When the technician actually does the work, they actually have a whole heap more information that they can work with, and they get this from the CT scans. As you can see, they have in their report, and I was able to get these with my scans, the 25th, 50th, 75th, and 95th percentile by age group, and I'm sitting there above the 95th. And as you can see, I'm improving as I go through the curves. The data that's available to the technician to make those assessments is a lot more detailed than what we would get in the doctor's report. So when you get a number, there's always more information behind it. The doctor would need to ask for that, or if you've got access to your scans, you can get in and do that yourself, which I do. As you'll see, it's broken down as a first pass in the different arteries, and then even within the further detail, each lesion. So if you've got 6 lesions in the LAD, you would see 6 lines here. I've got 4 in this case here, 1, 2, 3, 4, a bit in the other, and 2 in the RCA. And they give you data by the score, the volume. This here is the density, averaged out, the mean density. And then this is the mass, and we'll talk about each of them separately. And this is the follow-up year results. Now, what's a CT scan? A CT scan is essentially an X-ray of sorts that takes a whole heap of slices of your organ, in this case the heart, and captures in a thin slice, about 3 mil, the density change or the brightness of this light here. That's the Hounsfield brightness scale. What it is as calcification occurs, this gets brighter and brighter into white. You'll see bone here that shows up there. There's soft parts of bone which are a bit darker, and the measures take into account for every slice how much of each level of brightness there is in that little area. I haven't zoomed into this, but if you look at the scans, you can zoom right in and understand that. Obviously, the accuracy of the image is what's important, and there are many factors that still can influence the quality of that image. The pixelation, if your heart rate's a bit too high, it could actually give you a bit of a blurrier picture than if it's a lot more stabilized, and below 70 is what they're targeting. A couple of things to note: that when you're getting a CAC or repeat CACs done, try to use the same machine at the same lab using the same protocols that you did previously. There is variability within the machines. Even the way the machine will read, there could be some settings that could be slightly different, how many slices they take, the heart rate that you've got, and the quality of the image, the variability within the testing procedures and settings, using the same lab and protocols. Remember that the CAC is actually a calculated number, and we'll get a little bit more into the detail of that in a sec. And monitor your changes in your approach and compare your results. Again, this is a relative number rather than purely an absolute. So let's get into some of the detail here. With the scoring itself, you'll note, well, I'll explain first. The blue results are my original test in May 23. The orange are my end of 23. I wanted to do a protocol change, so I took that test. That was only 8 months between those two. And then 12 months later, the green results were the end of 24. What we'll see here on the right is that my total score actually went up from the first score to the second score. And we would get that if calcification was going up. We would also get that if volume was going up. And we'll have a look at both those in a sec. Sorry, I'll just correct that. I said if calcification is going up, if the density of the calcification was going up, okay? And then we see between the second test and the third test, I've had a reduction in score from 339 to 268. A big chunk of that is in the LAD. I did get an increase in my other arteries from 25 to 35, but that dropped back to 28. And then the RCA, essentially, I'll call that much of a muchness, as much as there's a slight increase for the accuracy of the test and the small number of this. It could be a rounding error, it could be a quality of the image, it could be a number of things there. This is where it gets interesting: volume. So volume is the amount of space that the plaque takes up. Noting that we had 4 lesions in my case. If it was all in one location, it'd be a big solid mass, probably taking up more space in the artery if it's just one location. If it's spread out over different points in the arteries, then it's going to block the artery a little bit less because it's spread out a bit more for the same number, that is. But anyway, let's get into the numbers here. So my initial test had a total of 269 cubic millimeters. The second test, as much as the score went up, my volume decreased, which directly tells us that the density increased. It stabilized. The third test, the third number, is the LAD, is the end of 24 test, and that again reduced even further. So we had a significant change from the first one to the second one in volume, 20 cubic millimeters, and then a significant change of 47 cubic millimeters in the second to third test. Now, the expectation, left untreated, is that CAC score, volume, and everything else goes up year on year. The CAC score is expected to go up 25% year on year. The best that you're told you can hope for is a stabilization and not getting any worse, but don't expect reduction. Even if these tests were a little bit out in terms of the quality of the image or those sorts of things, they are still showing a significant regression. So in 12 months from this last test, which is another 6 months away, I'll do the same again and we will see, will it regress? I hope so. No guarantees. Maybe there was an error with one test or the like, but we are seeing 3 reference points and it's going in the right direction. This here is looking at our mass. Now, I didn't get a score of mass for the first test, but we see from our second and our third test, there is reduction across the board in all those mass numbers. As the numbers get closer to 1 or 0, the accuracy of relative change and accuracy of the image starts to get diminished. It's a relative risk issue. It's like relative risk. The number is that small that it has a accuracy issue. These are the same numbers looking as percentages, the LAD in 4 different lesions and so on. So the data is just transferred. This is the CAC score. You'll note that first year, the first 12 months annualized, I had a score increase of 8%. In the second 12 months, it actually decreased 21. The interesting thing here is we started to see improvements across the board. So the LAD looks like it was fairly stable, albeit a slight increase, but then significantly dropped. In the other, we had an increase, but again, it's a small number over a small starting point, or a reasonable number of 10 over a small starting point. And then the RCA was a slight increase as well. I'll jump to the volume though, and the volume numbers tell us a more important story. Because I didn't have the breakdown of the first results by lesion that came later, I still had an overall 13% decrease in volume. The LAD in particular was 20%. That's the one I'm interested in. That's the one that's causing me the grief at this point in time. The RCA had a decrease of 22% of volume, and the other had an increase from 21 to 31 cubic millimeters. We know that dropped in the third test significantly. So we're seeing good things, right? We're not getting too hung up on things. We are seeing an improvement in the right direction. Let's jump to the mass. The same thing. We're seeing the mass decrease. So if my volume is decreasing and my mass is decreasing, then you would question, what does that mean about my density, right? So the interesting thing about density is I had a bit of a mix. These are the density numbers from the last 2 tests. We'll see overall it increased, and on a slice by slice, we had some ups, we had some downs and the like. It could be the quality of the image, as I said. We don't normally see density decrease. In my case, I've seen some density increases, which is great, but there's some density decreases. Now, again, is that the quality of the image? Is it the scan? Quite possibly. Will that affect the quality of the score? possibly because it is a function of density, but notwithstanding, we're seeing a improvement in all directions there. So in summary, remember that the CAC, use it as an indicative number, not as an absolute. If you don't use the same machine, then you can't even use the reference as consistent because there'll be many confounders. Consistency is key. Use the same machine if you can in the same lab. It's a calculated number. We want to see more than just the finished sum. It's like saying the number 42. I can come up with the number 42 many different ways. But if I just say, okay, 42, so what? It doesn't really tell me anything. If I want to focus on things, I want to see the stabilized plaque happening, which is a density increase. I want to see the volume decrease and the mass decrease. The score will go up as density increases if we don't have any increase in volume. Even with volume stationary, density and density increases, then the score will go up. We want to monitor the volume and the mass and the density. Okay, thank you. Hope that helps explain a few things.